am Captain Spawn, and this is day 338 of Spawn Year. Redeemer is back, or more accurately, somebody called Redeemer is in this issue. He seems to be an entirely different character from our last Redeemer, Eddie, as nothing that ever happened with him, like blaming Spawn for trapping him in hell, comes up here. And like with most everything, I find myself wondering if Heaven has chosen a new Redeemer, or if the Eddie version falls in that pile of stuff McFarlane is throwing away because it doesn't fit with his current vision, which he so obviously put so much thought into. And this is one of those new reinventions I kinda like, and it would work so much better in a full-on reboot. According to The Angel, our brand new woe is me, I can't remember anything so I'll be Jack Bauer if he was from hell protagonist mutilated a few issues back, male angels are joined to symbiotes just like hellspawns, reinforcing that idea that heaven and hell use the same morally dubious tactics, and both are just using humans as tools to achieve their aims. An ideal Morrison introduced with Anti-Spawn that McFarlane sort of continued with Redeemer. The problem is, there was never an explanation for why Redeemer was even needed with all those scantily clad warrior angels running around, or why all the heaven-born creatures were female, except a lot later when Hogwin introduced the faction of male angels who went away from heaven but refused to take sides, which was meant to explain where Maman came from. What we have here doesn't cover everything, but McFarlane is starting to build a more concrete and intriguing lore. I just have to forget about everything except what McFarlane tells me not to in order to appreciate it. One of my big questions back when angels only seemed to be women was how in the world they reproduced and why they would naturally be attracted to men, as Angela was attracted to Spawn. In this update, Redeemer's wife is the angel Jim and Clown tortured and drove insane, and since she thought Jim belonged to heaven at first, I can reasonably assume there are other men like Redeemer in heaven. We aren't told explicitly that all the male angels are actually humans given special costumes, but that certainly seems plausible. And wouldn't it be fascinating if all the male angels ran off when Satan turned traitor, and the only way the angels can reproduce is by recruiting human spawns of their own? Of course, you should have some male angels being born then, but it might raise interesting gender questions if the main difference between heaven and hell was simply mostly females versus males, and some philosophical ideas could be explored. Is there some humanity inherently in both sides if they're including so many humans in their soldiers, and when heaven is mixing human blood in their very offspring? That would be a great way to finally deal with the notion of heaven and hell both having the capacity for good, as opposed to the far more simplistic and less interesting way it's always been handled. Both sides are pretty much straight up evil. This is all just conjecture, of course. I'm letting my mind run away with itself because it's so exciting not to feel like my brain is a bowl of soup reading one of these. Redeemer is sent to kill Sarah. I'm not sure why, except that she has something to do with Spawn, but I'm not even sure why he knows that Jim is Spawn when the angel couldn't recognize him. When he sees Sarah's cross necklace, he leaves her in peace because she's a follower of God. That seems really at odds with the heaven that was only concerned with the quantity of souls it amassed arbitrarily based solely on how many people died and how many the other side got, and nothing to do with belief or works. So perhaps McFarlane has done away with that too. Though to be fair, that has never been consistent. Then Mark sets Jim up by bringing him a war vet in a wheelchair to prove his theory. Sure enough, later on, the man's a walking miracle, and now Mark has his story, forcing Jim to either trust him to work with Jim and put the story out himself, or let it become a media circus. Before he has a chance to decide what to do, Clown shows up to manipulate him some more, and just as Clown's telling him that both sides will sometimes bide their time for years before making a move, don't I know it, Redeemer shows up, demanding to get his wife back. I like that he isn't just another random soldier sent to fight Spawn, but that he has a clear personal motivation, something I must admit McFarlane is finally grasping. Clown wants control, Jim wants to know about his past, Mark wants his story, Sarah wants to belong somewhere, and Redeemer wants his wife back. And once again, Redeemer is the most sympathetic character, and I wonder how he's not the protagonist. I should say here that although I've complained that Jim isn't real likable yet, and it's hard to appreciate a blank slate that kills everyone he feels is part of the conspiracy against him, at least he's proactive and not sitting around crying about it. Ironically, this time it's Redeemer who's trying to get back to his wife, and it's Spawn's fault she's gone, though the situation is totally different from Al's. So Redeemer conveniently knocks Spawn off a roof, long enough for Clown to reveal his Violator form, still pretending he and Spawn are pals, and Violator's his enemy too. And comically, Spawn doesn't manage to crawl back up until 5 pages later, after some vampires show up and crucify Redeemer on top of his wife's wings, per Violator's order. Violator calls them shadow players, wildcards who work for whatever side is on top and hold no allegiance to heaven or hell. Their leader, Blood, gets name dropped, and I'm sure he'll matter later on. At the end, Spawn takes Redeemer's defeat as a solid sign of Clown's friendship, and Clown lays it on real thick, saying he's sorry all this is happening to them and that he really needs a friend right now. Jim says he's the only person he seems to be able to trust. And yeah, Jim's maybe a little oblivious, but compared to Al, he's remarkably perceptive, and this is as genuinely duplicitous as I've ever seen Clown. I don't know what was in McFarlane's coffee when he wrote this, but the writing's tighter, the pacing is better, the storytelling is denser, and I wasn't bored. Compared to the last 12 issues, this is quite good. I don't trust this to be the start of a trend or anything, but if I could get this for the next month, it'd be the closest I've ever gotten in Spawn year to smooth sailing. Signed, Captain Spawn.